August 15, 2023. Good day all. This is a message from Sierra Victor. Sierra Victor side note. International politics is very unstable lately. At first we, as most people, anticipated an internal threat in the form of radical political parties and movements within South Africa. While we monitored this, we also kept in mind the cross-border threat from radical Muslim insurgents in our neighboring Mozambique. However, over the past couple of months you all have noticed that the tension between the BRICS countries, especially Russia, and the West, especially the United States, escalate. Should a real-world conflict break out between the West and BRICS, South Africa will find itself a strategic asset for either one of them. Take note of these messages we send out. Print the PDFs and file it. It will be a very useful tool in preparing to aid the local armed forces should an international conflict expand to within our borders. We will continue with Chapter 1. Characteristics and categories of built-up areas from An Infantryman's Guide to Combat in Built-Up Areas. FM 90-10-1 by the United States Department of the Army as written and released in 1995. Characteristics. Built-up areas consist mainly of man-made features such as buildings. Buildings provide cover and concealment, limit fields of observation and fire, and block movement of troops, especially mechanized troops. Thick-walled buildings provide ready-made, fortified positions. Another important aspect is that built-up areas complicate, confuse, and degrade command and control for the attacking force. Streets are usually avenues of approach. However, forces moving along streets are often canalized by the buildings and have little space for off-road maneuver. Thus, obstacles on streets in towns are usually more effective than those on roads in open terrain since they are more difficult to bypass. Subterranean systems found in some built-up areas are easily overlooked but can be important to the outcome of operations. They include subways, sewers, cellars, and utility systems. Categories. Built-up areas are classified into 4 categories. Villages, population of 3,000 or less. Strip areas, urban areas built along roads connecting towns or cities. Towns or small cities, population up to 100,000 and not part of a major urban complex. Large cities with associated urban sprawl, population in the millions, covering hundreds of square kilometers. Special considerations. Several considerations are addressed herein concerning combat in built-up areas. Battles in built-up areas. Battles in built-up areas usually occur when a city is between 2 natural obstacles and there is no bypass. The seizure of a city contributes to the attainment of an overall objective. The city is in the path of a general advance and cannot be surrounded or bypassed. The city has logistical, strategic, or political value. Target engagement. In the city, the ranges of observation and fields of fire are reduced by structures as well as by the dust and smoke of battle. Targets are usually briefly exposed at ranges of 100 meters or less. As a result, combat in built-up areas consists mostly of close, violent combat. Infantry troops will use mostly light and medium anti-tank weapons, automatic rifles, machine guns, and hand grenades. Opportunities for using anti-tank guided missiles are rare because of the short ranges involved and the many obstructions that interfere with missile flight. Small unit battles. Units fighting in built-up areas often become isolated, making combat a series of small unit battles. Soldiers and small unit leaders must have the initiative, skill, and courage to accomplish their missions while isolated from their parent units. A skilled, well-trained defender has tactical advantages over the attacker in this type of combat. He occupies strong static positions, whereas the attacker must be exposed in order to advance. Greatly reduced line-of-sight ranges, built-in obstacles, and compartmented terrain require the commitment of more troops for a given frontage. The troop density for both an attack and defense in built-up areas can be as much as 3 to 5 times greater than for an attack or defense in open terrain. Individual soldiers must be trained and psychologically ready for this type of operation. Munitions and special equipment. Forces engaged in fighting in built-up areas use large quantities of munitions because of the need for reconnaissance by fire, which is due to short ranges and limited visibility. Rifle and machine gun ammunition, 40 mm grenades, hand grenades, and explosives are high-usage items in this type of fighting. Units committed to combat in built-up areas also must have special equipment such as grappling hooks, rope, snap links, collapsible pole ladders, rope ladders, construction material, axes, and sandbags. When possible, those items should be either stockpiled or brought forward on call, so they are easily available to the troops. Communications. Urban operations require centralized planning and decentralized execution. Therefore, communications plays an important part. Commanders must trust their subordinates' initiative and skill, which can only occur through training. The state of a unit's training is a vital, decisive factor in the execution of operations in built-up areas. Radio communication in built-up areas is normally degraded by structures and a high concentration of electrical power lines. Many buildings are constructed so that radio waves will not pass through them. Visual signals may also be used but are often not effective because of the screening effects of buildings, walls, and so forth. Signals must be planned, widely disseminated, and understood by all assigned and attached units. Increased noise makes the effective use of sound signals difficult. Messengers can be used as another means of communication. Stress. A related problem of combat in built-up areas is stress. Continuous close combat, intense pressure, high casualties, fleeting targets, and fire from a concealed enemy produce psychological strain and physical fatigue for the soldier. Such stress requires consideration for the soldiers and small unit leaders' morale and the unit's esprit de corps. Stress can be reduced by rotating units that have been committed to heavy combat for long periods. Restrictions. The law of war prohibits unnecessary injury to non-combatants and needless damage to property. This may restrict the commander's use of certain weapons and tactics. Although a disadvantage at the time, this restriction may be necessary to preserve a nation's cultural institutions and to gain the support of its people. Units must be highly disciplined so that the laws of land warfare and rules of engagement are obeyed. Leaders must strictly enforce orders against looting and expeditiously dispose of violations against the civilian population. Fratricide avoidance. The overriding consideration in any tactical operation is the accomplishment of the mission. Commanders must consider fratricide in their planning process because of the decentralized nature of execution in the MOUT environment. However, they must weigh the risk of fratricide against losses to enemy fire when considering a given course of action. Fratricide is avoided by doctrine, by tactics, techniques, and procedures, and by training. Tactics. Tactics is the employment of units in combat or the ordered arrangement and maneuver of units in relation to each other and or the enemy in order to use their full potential. Techniques. Techniques are the general and detailed methods used by troops or commanders to perform assigned missions and functions. Specifically, techniques are the methods of using weapons and personnel. Techniques describe a method, but not the only method. Procedures. Procedures are standard, detailed courses of action that describe how to accomplish a task. Planning. A simple, flexible maneuver plan that is disseminated to the lowest level of command will aid in the prevention of fratricide. They should incorporate adequate control measures and fire support planning and coordination to ensure the safety of friendly troops and allow changes after execution begins. Execution. The execution of the plan must be monitored, especially with regard to the location of friendly troops and their relationship to friendly fires. Subordinate units must understand the importance of accurately reporting their position. Training. The most important factor in the prevention of fratricide is individual and collective training in the many tasks that support MOUT. Situational awareness. Well-trained soldiers accomplish routine tasks instinctively or automatically. This allows them to focus on what is happening on the battlefield. They can maintain an awareness of the relative location of enemy and friendly forces. Rehearsal. Rehearsal is simply training for the mission at hand. Commanders at every level must allow time for this critical task. Train to standard. Soldiers that are trained to the Army standard are predictable. This predictability will be evident to any NCO or officer who may be required to lead them at a moment's notice or who is observing their maneuvers to determine if they are friend or foe. We will continue in our next message with Chapter 2 Urban Analysis. Thank you for listening or reading this message. Please feel free to use and distribute as needed. Our messages are not by any means enticing you to a revolution of sorts, but rather to equip you with the necessary theoretical background in order to assist local armed forces or police in stabilizing a SHTF situation. Please contact any admin on any Sierra Victor group for our previous material or search for our channel on YouTube. We wish you well. Sierra Victor.